what's up, guys? This is Pastor Eddie. I'm here with Pastor Brandon.
What's up,
we
guys?
got Dive Deep coming at you on the camera. It is not Pastor Mike. I would have lost a lot of muscle mass and gained a couple inches. One day. Hey, I'm excited to dive into yesterday's sermon, the thorny soil, the seed in thorny places. Yeah.
It's an interesting one. And as I said on the onset of my message, is usually people hearing in the church, people who are attending church are going to find themselves in soil 3 or soil 4. The desire is soil 4. But soil 3 is, kind of that worldly aspect of like some of the cares of this world can start to choke the joy that we have in the Lord. And so kind of start as, hey, maybe pay attention to this one. And certainly next week of the desired soil, but we have to get through soil 3 to get to soil 4. So here we go.
Yeah. I really liked whenever you were talking about the difference between having concern over the things in this world versus being worried over the
care
things in this
versus
world.
worry.
Yeah.
Very different. It's okay to want good things. I want my daughter and my son to grow up in a free country that isn't being controlled by government at each and every step. So there are things that I care about, but to worry about them, that's going to cause me maybe to act in a way that's not really appropriate.
Yeah.
And, we are called to bear fruit, to have love and joy and peace and patience and all those things, self-control. But when you start to worry about things, some of that fruit that the world needs to see in us, it starts to be detracted because they're seeing otherworldly things in us and they don't really see the difference. And I thought you trusted God,
right?
But it doesn't really seem that way, or, so we have to be really careful of, yes, care, but don't worry.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like we have a little bit of like Christian worry, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you were talking about with the country or, I have to be concerned about it myself when it comes to like the stuff that's available for my kids to watch, know, and it can really easily slip into this place of like worrying about all the different possibilities for her outcome when instead like I do what I can do and trust God with what I can't do. And being okay to just at some point release it to God.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, it's okay to care because when you care, it causes, I believe, healthy action. Where worry sometimes can cause like a knee-jerk or an emotional reaction that might not really be appropriate. And so I think that's where the difference for me is. Like, as Christians, we should be running for school board council.
Yeah.
We should be coaches in the community to raise up kids. Teaching, as terrible as teaching is right now, seemingly, I heard that from a teacher just recently, like, man, it's not a good time to be a teacher. It's really, really hard just because of some of the restrictions they have now on them and some of the things that kids are allowed to get away with. And so it's important for Christians to, be in the world. Like I said yesterday, is where does light shine the brightest? Not in light,
right,
but in darkness. And so when we care about those things and the future of this country and care about the future of our kids and where our kids are being exposed to, sure, like we can do things to evoke change by voting the way that we think we should vote and, based off of our personal convictions. Those are all great things. I'm not saying don't care about anything in this world because we only care about what God thinks. Like, while that's true, it's also irresponsible too, because he's told us that we need to be good stewards of what he has put before us. And so I think that's a good thing. But worrying about things can cause you to sometimes lose self-control and get mad and put posts out there and, not be a good example of, how we need to be and react as a believer. So that's basically what I'm saying here is don't abandon your convictions or the cares that you have, but keep in the perspective that in the end, God is going to have the final word.
Yeah.
And right now he is setting up history so that there can be an ushering of the Antichrist. The Antichrist is going to come in a certain atmosphere. And the reason the Antichrist is going to come and be popular and the one ruler overall is because our world is going to become so awful that we're going to look to somebody who can put us all back together. And that's when the Antichrist comes. And that's why we got to be aware as believers of noticing who the Antichrist is. But knowing, God's going to send Jesus back to take care of us. The end, we win. But we got to get through some tough times. So don't worry about it. We know how if you know how it ends and you trust God in the ending of humanity, then you're not going to worry about things. Care? Sure. Be aware? Sure. Try to evoke change to where we think this is the best way to do things and for the future of our kids? Sure, like you said. But some people just get way too involved and invested, and that just can cause worry. That it's like, where truly is your trust because your actions are saying otherwise. Yeah. That's what Jesus is saying. Be careful, because those worldly things and treasures and cares of this world can start to choke your joy and start to choke, this spirit inside you that I've put in you, this seed. But all that stuff can choke out, and then eventually you're gonna die and produce no fruit.
Yeah, I love the balance that's in that, because it's not calling us to holy laziness, where we have such a utter lack of concern that we don't do anything.
Yeah, holy laziness annoys me too. Yeah.
And so, how do you know once you've crossed that boundary of concern into worry?
I think you look at the actions. Is it causing you to do nothing because you're so fed up? Is it when you're called to do something or say something and you don't want to anymore because you kind of lost hope in that? Or how is it consuming your mind? What types of thoughts is that particular issue that is causing you worry? How are you thinking about it? What kind of thoughts is it causing hatred in somebody? And that's not a good thing to do. So you just kind of got to know yourself. When you're healthy for the most part, the thoughts, God has given us control over our thoughts, but it is the worry kind of bleeding over into the healthy parts of you? Are you spending more time worrying about something than you are in the Bible getting God's opinion on it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's easier to see when you're in an unhealthy spot and headspace when you've been in a healthy spot and headspace before,
Yeah.
I was just talking to someone recently, a great guy that God's done incredible work in, and he talked about some of his struggles with alcoholism that he'd had for a decade, and up to the point where he was in liver failure, and eyes yellow,
Wow.
pain in his right side, and he still had not recognized yet that he had a problem. It's like, really?
He didn't see the symptoms.
Yeah.
Something to worry about.
And it was like, oh no, I still have control over this. I can stop whenever I want to, and was just totally deceived in what it was like. But I like having those warning signs so that if any of our listeners listen to it and they go, wow, I have spent a lot of time worrying, being consumed inside of my mind over things that I have no control over, and that doesn't add any hours to our life.
No, worrying won't add
really
any value to your life, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And in the Bible's opinion too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you and I are both extroverts.
Yeah.
Love talking to strangers. I can absolutely relate to being able to go into the grocery store and have conversations with strangers. And I really enjoy doing that as well. not everyone is extroverts, and I feel
Yeah.
this might not be true, but I feel like up north we're a more rare breed up here for whatever reason, and there's lots of introverts around.
Yeah.
What role might introverts play? So if we have the ability to share the gospel with more people, just kind of open-ended, what roles might introverts play in the responsibility that God has given them?
Yeah, I think God has gifted us differently. I think he's given us different personalities. Some of us are outgoing, some of us are not, so much. And, there's people who are very uncomfortable, talking to a total stranger about anything. But that's okay. Then that type of witnessing isn't for you. Then you maybe are called to disciple, which is important, to mentor on a one-on-one basis. Maybe God's calling you to do that instead of calling you that's why, a healthy church has multiple people with different gifts and abilities, and this is very scriptural. But then we're all working together for one goal. And so you and we need to lean into how God has made us, and we can we're not afraid to say anything to anybody when we're called to do so. Obviously, we got to use discernment in certain situations, which I rely on every time. But then there's other people who are like, that's just not me. Well, that's okay. Then you're probably not called to go in a grocery store and, talk to somebody, about anything, let alone your faith. And that's okay. That's fine. But you can't just use that excuse to do nothing.
Right.
You got to do something. And so if you're more of a one-on-one, go to your pastor or somebody and say, man, like I can't do that public stuff. But, I'd be willing to disciple a new believer. We have many opportunities that way. So you just got to lean into your calling and be in tune with who the Spirit made you to be, who God made you to be. And then, but also understand too, get out of your comfort zone too. God doesn't want you to live in the boat. He wants you to get out into waters to stretch you. And I think you just need to pray that God would give you that strength if that's what he wants you to do. He's not going to call everybody to do that.
Right.
It's like one of those things where you hear a testimony and you're like, oh my gosh, the huge transformation. I haven't had any of that. Like God hadn't, saved me from death, to life, literally, and then you're like, oh man, I kind of wish I had that kind of testimony because it's so cool. But no, that's not the testimony that God wants for you. So don't compare yourself to somebody else. And that includes, being a witness for Jesus as well. But lean into the way God has made you and do something. Don't just do nothing because you can't do that. You can do something.
Yeah, I love that. If I had a tagline for my life, it would be something along like intentionally getting uncomfortable.
Yeah, you have a lot of those stories that I'm just like, you're younger than I am, but I feel like you've lived 10 lives already. I'm like, seriously, how many jobs can somebody have before the age of 30 and or 25 even, or 20?
Yeah,
you've had so
most
many.
Most of them came before 20.
Right,
Yeah.
you're just like boom, boom, boom. But you're out there and you're a great storyteller and you have kind of a story for every occasion. And, when you give sermons, that's what people love is that. I can't wait for the next story. And just because you put yourself out there, you are introverted, you're not afraid to go out. And I mean, the whole kidnapping story that you told, I'm like, that would happen to him. Like, I've been in so many places and so many situations and cities, and like nothing like that has ever happened to me, knock on wood. And here you're telling the story. I'm like, you're just the person that would happen to. But
I've picked up other people. They didn't kidnap me.
So you picked him up.
Yeah,
and he took advantage of your niceness. Yep. Ah, okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was in a situation. I took a homeless man home with me one time, and that didn't turn out the best. I don't know if I've used that story yet.
No.
In the last 2.5 years, but a lot to learn in that story too, because I did pick somebody up. It didn't end with a kidnapping, but you and we would do stuff like that.
Right.
I don't know if it's a youth pastor thing or not. Like you have to be just a little bit crazy to go into youth ministry, which is absolutely true. I think you have to be crazier to go into youth ministry now than when I got involved in youth ministry 15 years ago. But lean into the way God made you. And he has you how he has you for a reason. So lean into that and figure out what it is that God wants you to do to bring your testimony. And, maybe offer some good online. If you're a really good writer, blog your thoughts, blog your stories, and let that get out there to inspire others.
Yeah, there's whole channels that are out there right now that are just people's testimonies.
Yeah.
It starts with a D. I can't remember the name of it. But you can look it up online, look up Christian testimonies. It's like Dejario testimonies or something along those lines. But there's millions of people that tune in just to hear how Jesus is working in someone's life. And so the possibility to be able to impact a really, really wide audience is incredible just for sharing your story.
Yeah. Right.
And so there is one more thing that, at least that I had to talk about, is this money. The love of money is the root of all evil.
Yeah.
But I know that I've been in multiple conversations recently where someone said, well, we know that money is the root of all evil.
If you have a lot, you're evil. That sort of thing.
And, to be honest, the person I was talking with was a relative, and none of my relatives have ever had any money. And so
mine neither.
I don't know if it's like a, us versus them kind of mentality that they leave off that one word. Or
I was on reduced lunches.
Yeah.
My whole, middle school, high school.
Yeah, same. So what do you think are some reasons that maybe people leave off that love of section?
I don't know. I just think it's a misinterpretation.
Yeah.
Maybe they've been taught that way. It's not a good teaching because it's not true. But at the same time, you don't want to preach the prosperity gospel because God doesn't promise everybody who comes to faith is going to live in abundance. That's not true. But if you do live in abundance, there's a reason for that. I think God has blessed you to be a blessing. But everywhere where Jesus talks about money, nowhere in there is because you're wealthy, you're automatically not in.
Right.
Sure, like the example that I gave, it's really hard for a rich person to enter because maybe a lot of people got rich in a not so good way.
Right.
Maybe they do have something inside of them that is greedy or wanting or not willing to give up everything. Just like the man, hey, you got good job, man. All the 10 commandments you're doing. But if you want to be perfect, go sell everything, then come follow me. And it's like, can't do that, Jesus.
Yeah.
Sorry. And so it revealed like he was all about, I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this. But Jesus like, how's your heart?
Right.
And the fact that you couldn't give up everything for me, you can't be my disciple.
Right.
And that is the problem with wealth, and what wealth can bring is that type of attitude. The more you have, the more you want. Yeah. The more you have, the more you want to keep for yourself. It's that temptation that when you are rich and you're blessed so much, then it's like, but if you see somebody in need, I do have you can have, you can have food, to eat.
Yeah.
Because I have all this, you don't even have food. Right. And so that's what Jesus is getting at is we need to watch out, take care of our brothers and sisters. But you need to be in a place where if I ask you to give up everything, you need to give up everything. He's not going to all the time ask you to give up everything, but there might come a time where you're going to be faced with the choice, give up everything. And the more you have, it's harder to give up. So that's what Jesus is trying to get at here is wealth isn't necessarily a problem, but it's easy to be a problem.
Right.
And that's why I think he talks more about money than he does about heaven or hell combined, because the danger of it shifts your focus to self rather than on God. And I think that's the root of all evil, is when you want to live apart from God. And that's what wealth can bring you, is a self-dependence, self-reliance, self-indulgence.
Yeah, and I'd heard that when he was talking about the camel going through the eye of a needle, I think it was maybe really popular in the early 2000s about a camel going. Have you ever heard this?
Oh, yeah, I think I know where you're going, yeah.
But then it wasn't true.
Right.
Like someone came back later and was like, let me research this thing that has been popularly talked about from pulpits. And when they went and researched it, it was like, no, this is...
So the story of the needle being kind of a little
like
gate.
a gate,
yes.
And like the camel would have to get on its knees. So and it's like, it's hard, but it's not that hard, you know?
Right.
And it was shifted a little bit, maybe a little bit more toward trying to keep a balance inside of there. But I think, you know, Jesus is speaking hyperbolically about it is insane. Like the more money you got, it is infinitely harder to continue to keep your priorities straight.
Right, because there's a greed and there's a self-love that comes there. And not that self-love is bad. I mean, we should, you know, love ourselves, you know, because if we're going to love other people as we love ourselves, you know, there needs to be that. But
that reliance needs to be like, I can't do this. And the more successful you are, it's hard to keep that in balance.
Yeah, I mean, we live in a world where it takes money to survive.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we live in that world. And so we need money to survive for sure. But God says, hey, I'll supply your needs in some way.
That's right.
You know, I will. But if you have abundance, God has blessed you, there's a reason. And it's not about you. It's about others. And that's where he tries to get, like, where's your heart with your wealth? So...
Well, Pastor Brandon, thanks for another great sermon. Thank you guys for joining us. Hope you enjoyed diving deep with us. Make sure that you subscribe, like the video. That's going to help us not only be able to continue to do this, but help other people see what's going on here as we're diving deep into Scripture together. Subscribe on all the different platforms that you can. That'll help us out, and we'll see you.
Spotify? Are we on Spotify, Cameron? We're not on Spotify, so not all of the platforms.
Yeah, ban Spotify.
Yeah, most of them. Most ban them? Why?
I don't know.
Yeah,
they have audiobooks now.
I love Spotify, man. That new AI DJX.
No, I'll have to check that out.
Dude, check out DJX, man.
Okay.
Like hey, it's Tuesday. You usually listen to this. You know, so I'm going to put on, you know, these 5 songs are going to be in this genre and you haven't listened to this, or hey, this is new music based on your listening, you know, so that you can hear. And he talks to you.
Wild.
Tells you what's coming up. It's pretty cool.
Wild. Yeah. All right. Well, hey, check that out and we'll see you next week.
But we're not on Spotify. It's all good. Hey, God bless you all. Thanks for being with us.